you've got all of the drama of like this kind of a superhero horror fiction movie thing, but you're actually still making a really important point, a very human point by the end.
Yeah, I wanted to give people that wanted just explosions and actions and demons crawling up walls and throwing knives at, innocent people, like the demons doing that.
Mhm.
I wanted to give them those sorts of things, but then it's like, a spoonful of sugar or whatever. At the end is where,
Yeah.
you get to the meaning of the story and the heart of it, and what the message I really want to get across.
Mhm.
And hopefully they've had so much fun along the way that even if they're not spiritual or they're not Catholic or whatever, they can appreciate the ending.
Yeah, and I think a lot people from a bunch of different faith backgrounds, whether you have one or not, are also they're going to get the idea of um, overcoming an interior weakness and
Mhm.
letting it go and moving past it. And maybe they simply see that you've wrapped it inside something really cool. So, hey, friends, welcome to Legend Makers. This is a special issue for Legend Haven. We're just going to keep rolling with it because he's been saying such cool stuff. He gifted me a really cool issue of Soulfinder. I think you can see this. It's called Infinite Ascent. And what can you give us a quick overview of this mission? It's like this priests with guns heading up into the Himalayas. There's a CIA kind of drug sting, and then it doesn't go south. It just goes weird and dramatic. Can you give us a quick overview? Doug Ernst is the graphic novel author
Yeah, thanks
for
for having me
Soulfinder.
back, man. It's been great to talk to you again. So, long story short, this is a continuation of my series on combat veteran exorcists. They take on a demon called Blackfire and his minions until the end of time. In this particular issue, there's a network of bad guys that they ran into in the last issue, which was Black Tide. The U.S. government liked what they did. They said, "Hey, you did a really great job, but there's more. This is a global network of individuals. There's this rogue CIA guy. He became a big drug kingpin, and we've been sending SEALs into this area to try and get him because they won't extradite him. They're tight with China, and for a number of diplomatic reasons, they don't want to let this guy go. So we've been trying to send SEALs in to get this guy because he's causing all sorts of problems with his drugs. And every time the SEALs go in, something supernatural happens. They don't come back. They're gone. So we think you, Father Patrick Redder, you with you're the expert with the demons and the supernatural. If you go in there in your military history, your background, you got the skill
Mhm.
set to get in. And we have a man on the inside. If you could get him, well, we will have the helo there to exfiltrate you guys. But if something goes wrong, we wipe our hands of you. We don't know anything about you because we don't want to cause any diplomatic
Mhm.
issues.
Right. Yeah. And so, of course, it goes wrong. So, what I want to chat briefly today, I mean, it's what's a story unless it does go wrong. And what's so fun, like you mentioned combat veteran exorcists, and I'm like, I wonder if I can, like, in the first half of the book, not the second half, there's like a scene where they're like climbing a rock face, and there's like these weird, like satanic spiders come out and start interfering with them. And because they're exorcists, they're praying some of these actual prayers that I think give them that edge to continue the mission on the cliff face where other seals wouldn't have, because there's the acceptance of that spiritual component. So here's what I want to ask you for today's. I want to touch on the sense of creating a character, and for the title of this show, the idea of the dragon within, that each of us carry perhaps some kind of an unmet or unaddressed dragon or a problem or a sin or a weakness or a need or whatever. And unless we address that, it grows and it coils and it just becomes a much bigger issue later in life. And that's kind of what this novel is about. Under all the drama, it ends with this insight, this lesson that um, we need to be paying attention, and there's some inner work that has to be done. There's reflection and so on. Can you speak about creating characters where you're having fun with your story, but also accepting the fact that things need to happen and we need to use them to inspire work on that inner dragon?
Yeah, this is one of those issues where, like I was telling you before we went live here, I wanted to have a story where you have all the explosions and the whiz bang pow, all of that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a message about forgiveness that I wanted to get across to people. and I wanted to get across a universal message. So obviously my characters are Catholic men, but something that could relate to anyone, where you could be of any faith, but like you were saying, there's been people in your past, perhaps your parents, that have hurt you in ways that you carry on throughout your life. And so, without giving anything away, spoilers, it's very important for one particular character to essentially look inward at one point in time and see what sort of baggage that he's brought with him that he needed to let go of many, many years ago.
Yeah. What I thought was beautiful and also cool. There aren't too many stories where we see this kind of thing, where it's pretty usual to, like, you think of the Avengers and stuff. The climax is the punching out of Thanos, and that's how you solve the problem. To have a story kind of go this route, where the priority is not punching out the bad guy. A hefty dose of that does happen. It is that kind of story, but where that's not kind of the point and the goal, but it's this sense of that inner conversion. In creating this story, how do you feel you stuck the landing, and how have people enjoyed reading that and following that?
Yeah, the early reactions so far, we have the digital version out, and now it's up on Iconic. I sent out some review copies, so there's reviews floating out there. They were really happy with it, and I wasn't sure how people would take to the ending, because, like you were saying, there wasn't a big Thanos punch out scene. It was sort of an introspection sort of thing with one of the main characters, and I think maybe because people don't really get that often, it was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. So I wanted to throw people a little bit of a curveball, and then hopefully it paid off. But it seems like the message is resonating with people, so that's pretty cool.
So why does that mean so much to you? Like, why was this a theme that you ended up working into this story? And maybe you can sort of touch on where Soulfinder's been going.
Yeah, so each book, Demons Match, Black Tide, this one, and there's a short story called War Cry that's also out, that takes place at Arlington Cemetery. I try and focus on some sort of big issue, like I said, that was like touches a universal nerve in people. And it's one of those things where the fiction that I see that's out there, a lot of it is bad. It's junk food for your mind and your soul. And I didn't want to create junk food. I wanted to create something that was healthy, but tastes good, I guess. And so
Yeah.
to see people that are actually enjoying their quote unquote spinach or whatever you want to call it, that makes me really happy, because at some point in time, I'm going to face my maker, and I have to answer for what I put out into the world. And in my youth, I put out a lot of anger and other things, but hopefully I'm making up for lost time, and these books can give honor to the gifts that I've been given by God.
You used a really cool phrase where you said universal nerves. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's one of those things where everyone across time and across cultures, they know what it's like to be betrayed by somebody, whether it's a close friend, whether, again, it's your brother, your sister, your parents, whomever. There's just certain things that you all experience. Now, not everyone can put it within, obviously, a Catholic context or whatnot, but they understand that. And it's like imprinted in your being, your conscience, about good and evil, whether people want to admit that or not. And so whether they can articulate what is really going on in terms of spiritual warfare, they might not know about spiritual warfare. But if you talk to them at any length of time, they understand these ideas, and they get them, and they appreciate them, and they could benefit from learning about the importance and need for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. What do you think has been the most important thing you've learned since you've started this journey with these books and this writing? Most important thing that you think you've learned about spiritual warfare?
Well, it's a blessing in that as I'm working on these ideas and trying to unpack them and untangle some of these knots, I'm always learning something new, and like both in the research process and in the writing, and I'm learning about myself and my own foibles and my own shortcomings. So in some bizarre way, if I'm doing my job correctly, I'm also recognizing where I'm falling short spiritually along the way. And hopefully I will be a better person at the end of this particular creative journey as well.
Mhm. For those who've never met you, what's a little bit of your background story and what inspired Soulfinder? And we'll
So my
certainly link
background,
to the full interview in the
sure.
comments, but a quick
No, my
overview.
background story is in high school. I was a goofball, and in classes I liked, I did really well in English. And classes I didn't like, I messed around. And anyway, so I went into the military shortly after high school for numerous reasons, but in part also because I goofed off. But I went into the military. I spent some time overseas. That time allowed me to think and readjust in my priorities. I got out, went to school, and at some point in time, so over time, I was always fascinated by the military and giving honor to military and veterans and the sacrifices that they make.
Mhm.
But my creative writing was always my first love. So I ended up working for a newspaper for many years. I was in media, but I wanted to get back to creative writing.
Mhm.
And so at some point in time, I met an artist named Timothy Lim, who's also a practicing Catholic, and everything just fell together. Also, Matt Weldon is another artist I met who's a man of faith. And everything just kind of fell into place for me to get back into writing this particular series and to hopefully kind of give back to all the people that helped me along the way to become a better person.
So if since spiritual warfare then is, as you said, it's like a universal nerve that sort of acts on us whether we know exactly what's going on or not, what do you believe is the Christian sort of Catholic Orthodox contribution or response to this problem?
So one of the things that the Catholic faith allows me to do, particularly with the medium of comic books, is whether you believe in spiritual warfare or not, that angels and demons are real, that there's something beyond the veil that we cannot see. That is what Catholics believe. So the comic book
Mhm.
allows me to actually show good and evil in ways, and whether it's a dragon that you're talking about, or a demonic snake, or a demonic spider, or whatever, that actually stand in, that are metaphors for these sort of deeper issues that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And again, it could be something where if you are not of the faith, you can still appreciate the metaphors or the ideas that I'm talking about. And it's essentially like maybe some sort of, like, I don't want to say gateway, like gateway drug or whatever, but it's a doorway
An
that I'm
introduction. Yeah.
leading somebody to. And I'm saying, I believe that if you go through this doorway, uh, it will help you live a happy and healthy life, a life worth living. And but if not, hopefully I've given you enough ideas along the way to also help you live a productive and
Mhm.
joyful life.
Yeah. And then so there's this sense of giving people like metaphors and tools for their imagination, and maybe having a bit of fun with that, kind of flexing that imagination. But then you're also introducing a very definitive answer to the problem. It's not the kind of with your exorcist characters, they're not necessarily beating around the bush with like, well, we need to kind of, this is explicit and ultimate evil. We need to kind of parlay with that and cut a deal with that. It's like, well, that is not the nature of this framework. Maybe there are other discussions that can be had, but the exorcist is somebody who comes in. He's like a tip of the spear. We're going to clean up and provide guidance and deliverance from very distinct issues. And I think that there's a hunger and an interest in that today.
One of the things I wanted to get away from is these sort of muddy gray areas, moral relativism that I see in a lot of comic books today. And I wanted it to be where it's black and white, it's good and evil, but it's not done in a ham-fisted, corny way.
Mhm.
It's done in a very serious way, where, like, no, there is good and there is evil, and there are situations where if you have uh, the grace of discernment, you can figure out what is the right decision and what is the the wrong decision in any given scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as we've, in starting to wrap up, in what's so cool about this particular issue, and what's is not only it's a ton of fun, but it does pull us to reflect more interiorly that there are some things that if we don't address them, if we don't find out how they're affecting us, like we all have, what is it? We all have like our pet sins, things that we're like, yeah, it's kind of a problem, but I kind of like that one. So we're just going to not put light on that or turn attention to that. We'll just leave that one alone for a little while. I can handle that. I can deal with that. But it's like a dragon, and it stays in the dark, unaddressed, it grows and it gets worse, and it can get to a point where it can impact your complete ability to respond to the need of a moment or a mission, which is exactly what the situation the character is put in the story. Is his final challenge is to think along those lines. And I thought it was very cool how real it was that such a dramatic story would have such a real element.
Yeah, it's best to deal with the dragons when they're baby dragons or whatever you want to call it than full-grown adults that have been around the block or two.
Yeah.
A time or two.
Well, Doug, where can people find you online? Sorry, it's Douglas, isn't it?
Either one doesn't work.
Okay.
I'm fine with anything but Doug.
Okay. I couldn't remember if it was your dad who called you Doug or something, you didn't like it or something. So, Doug, where can people find you online and get their copies of Soulfinder?
Sure. Well, I'm on Instagram under just Douglas Ernst. I'm on Twitter, Douglas Ernst. And if they want the books, they could go to iconicomics.com. And my email address, douglasernst@douglasernst.blog, is also there. So if people don't want to go through Iconic Comics, they just want to order the books directly through me, then they can do that as well.
Cool. Well, thanks, Doug. And I hope that folk enjoyed this conversation. If you're at Legend Haven at the con, you can hang around and ask questions with Doug and chat about the latest issue of Soulfinder, Infinite Ascent, and learn about the new project that Doug's working on. If you are not yet familiar with legend fiction, it's the creative community for Catholic and Orthodox writers to create this kind of stories and have this level of fun right here. That's a place to give and get feedback, share your works in progress, and maybe double or triple your writing output because it's so much fun. Check us out at legendfiction.com. Thanks again and enjoy the con. God bless you.
Thanks.